afternoon, everyone. So you survived. I know from the literature that teacher educators are survivors. So you've shown that today, and thank you for coming to this session. So you just saw a brief introduction of who I am. My name is Helma Olbekink, and I come from the Netherlands. And I'm here with a group of 10 teacher educators who all joined this conference with various backgrounds. And I just heard this morning that Moffat Institute celebrates 40 years. I think that's a great achievement. And I'm the fortunate person to be the chair of the Dutch Teacher Educators Association. And we celebrate 45 years this year. But we have a lot to learn from you. So I'm just really happy to be here. So this afternoon, I would like to talk with you about teacher agency as a possible key for regaining passion in teaching. And I thought one of the things I'm researching is teacher agency, and this passion thing really triggered me. And I saw in this conference that there are people here who are researching passion. I am not a passion researcher, but I am very passionate about my subject, and I hope to give you some ideas about how I think these agency and passion might relate. So before we start talking about that, I thought it's really important to talk about teacher professionalism and teacher educator professionalism and how it's under pressure. Then I want to tell you something about the concept of teacher agency. Probably some of you are really familiar, others may not be that familiar. I think there are many topics throughout the conference relating to teacher agency. I visited a resilience program and ideas this morning, which I think is very much related to it. So yes, he was sitting there. So I thought it was really great to hear about that. And finally, I want to give you some ideas about how I think passion and teacher agency relate, which I hope spark discussion or maybe relate to your own practice or research in teacher education. But I thought I cannot give you this talk if I don't tell you something about who I am and my professional passion. I can talk with you about my other passions, but you can talk to me afterwards. But my professional passion. And the first thing I thought about was, I don't know if there are people from Germany here. Are there people from Germany? Yes? Okay. Maybe you recognize this picture because there is this great documentary, German documentary called Herr Bachmann und seine Klasse, or Herr Bachmann and his class. And I watched it partly, and I thought this is something that for me represents my professional passion, because I think one of the things this Herr Bachmann you see here on the left with the white hat shows is for me the combination of both personal engagement with his student on the one hand, using his passions like music to engage his student, but also looking how he can further help their students build the content knowledge. And he combines it in a lovely way. So if you have somehow the opportunity to watch it, please do. It really makes my teacher educator heart beat faster. It's such a great example. So the other thing that's really my passion is combining theory and practice. And I use this image for people who may know that it's something Geert Kelchtermans wrote about the metaphor of zipping theory and practice. And I like to do that because I am not the academic researcher talking about teachers, talking about teacher educators. I want to be part of that practice, and I'm not the totally practice person. I like to combine it all the way, which creates all kinds of tensions, but that's something that really drives me. So I guess you all have your professional passions as you are sitting here, and probably for quite a lot of you, there are specific passions in teacher education. And I hope this conference and maybe this talk will spark your passion also. But I want to start with the teacher. For me, looking at teachers and teacher professionalism, very central is the idea of the relation, and I borrowed that from Geert Kelchtemans. The teaching profession is a relational profession. You're engaging all the time with your students, with your fellow teachers, with your principals, school leaders, and also as a teacher educator, the relation is very important. It's a core thing of the profession. We often talk about that we want to achieve things through education, we want to increase student outcomes. It's all very valuable, but we're working with people, so we cannot decide always what the outcomes can be. We have to work in the context with our knowledge to achieve that. So the relation is a central part of that profession. And you see all kinds of other characteristics I think you can read, but I think it's also very important for me to talk about it as a profession, although I think not in every context it is possible to sort of live it as a profession. And I will talk about that in a second. So when you talk about teachers, I also think immediately about teacher educators. And there's also something specific about teacher educators, and I think many of you know the phrase, how I teach is the message. So it's that double loop you're constantly engaged in as a teacher educator. Making the learning visible, modeling the practice, it's really essential in your role as a teacher educator. So I think these two, I just wanted to mention that before we talk about what the pressures are on the profession. So I was talking about this, it sometimes seems like open doors because we've been talking about this for really some time. We've been talking this morning about the really relevant issue of the teacher shortages and teacher attrition. But I think also increasingly diverse student population, accountability in many countries. I recognize that in the context I'm working in the Netherlands, these things all influence teacher professionalism. I know teachers backing off on professional development because they just won't get the time. They're not facilitated because there are teacher shortages. I know teachers who developed and want to bring research in the school, but the school principal says, no, it's no time for that now. We should focus first on doing the basic things in the school, making that possible. So I think the context in which teachers are working often really influences their professionalism, and they sometimes feel pushed like in a way that they are just executing what other people ask them. Well, they want to be, we heard this morning, autonomous. They want to have, to be able to use their professional knowledge and to use that in practice to bring their students further. So sometimes this is referred to as constrained professionalism. And listening to stories of teachers, I recognize that now and maybe even more than a few years ago. And it actually makes me quite sad. But I just wanted, I'm going to skip the next one. So looking at that situation a few years ago, and talking to my colleague in a cafe after a conference, that's why going to conference is very good, and talking afterwards is maybe even better. So go to the cafe tonight, go to a restaurant, talk about what you heard today. So what happened to me, I sat there with my colleague, my Israeli colleague, I don't know if she's here. Lenore, are you here? No, she's not here, but I saw her today. We were sitting there, we were having a beer, and we wrote down a research question on a beer mat. I don't know if I used the right translation, but you probably know what I mean. It was in Belgium, so they have very good beers, and they always provide this so you can write down your ideas. We were talking about it, and we said, we heard all stories today about constrained teacher professionalism, but can we not build a counter-narrative? Can we not just show stories of teachers who are not constrained, but who are able, despite the circumstances, maybe resilience is also a word there, to bounce back, to make their own choices and to make sure that they can provide the best possible teaching for their students. So that's when we started off doing research in different contexts in Israel, in the Netherlands, and we can later continue with our research in Norway also. And we collected stories of teachers who were able to to find their way in challenging circumstances. And that's when my interest for the concept of agency was sparked, because I saw that these teachers somehow used resources in their context to make choices that are different. And often these teachers were highly driven and they just wanted to go for those students. So if you want to read more, small brackets now, I made some edits to the slides. And I will send an updated version to the conference organization, and you can see the references. I added some references also to this study. So that's where it started. But what are we talking about? So I think the concept of teacher agency came up in relation also to these ideas of constrained professionalism, accountability, but also in relation to educational innovations. For example, there are papers from Scotland, from the United States. In different countries, they have done this type of research. And for me, I think it's really important that agency is a process. We talked this morning about other concepts that have a process, but it's a continuous process. It's not something like you have agency or you don't have it. I think everyone has a certain amount of agency. We are not routine robots like people. We have choices to make, but we can be more or less agentic in different circumstances. And maybe it's just a thought experiment. If you think of yourself in different circumstances, it might be that in some circumstances you are able to use the resources and make your own choices and be very agentic, and in other circumstances it might be less. I've been studying this, so I've been reflecting a lot on this aspect in my own practice. So it's a process, and that process is fed by a continuous interplay of me as a person, so what drives me, my motivation, my expertise, but also the context in which I'm working. So working in a school with a school leader who supports you, working with colleagues that build together a learning culture helps you in being agentic. That interplay, I think, is really important. I also think it can be dynamic over time. So there might be periods that teachers have like personal issues, maybe things they have in home, or maybe a crisis in the school, and that they experience that they're less agentic. So it can be dynamic over time. And it has a focus. So it's always focused on something. Your agency is a conscious decisions you make, for example, to improve in certain aspect of the curriculum, to research something in your school, to make different choices in working with a group of students you find difficult, for example. And it's normative. I've really come to realize that all the time that it's really normative. It also, it goes back to your own norms and values that you use to make choices in your practice. So I often use the definition by a Finnish colleagues who describe agency as something that is practiced when professional subjects or communities exert influence, make choices and take stances in ways that affect their work and their professional identities. I think the definition provided by the Finnish people, I think, is very comprehensive. But I would like to add something from the work of Priestley and Bista, who wrote what they described the ecological model of teacher agency. And they also really specifically add, I think, the aspect of time. So if you're acting in a certain moment in time, you are influenced by your past experiences, and you're also somehow influenced by your aspirations for the future. So if your past experiences in the school have been negative, you might respond differently to what's going on than a colleague who comes in freshly and does not have that experience with a school leader or with certain classes. So I think that aspect of time adds to the idea of agency. Just going to check for a second how much time do we have? 15 minutes. Yeah. So we did some research on teachers doing a PhD in their own school. And we specifically looked if these teachers, how they sort of use the resources in their environment to contribute to school development. And we tried to describe the interaction between personal and contextual resources. And we saw that it's really vital how teachers interpret their environment to be able to make specific choices, for example, to be able to contribute to curriculum development. And we described them as either stimulating, so it could be that the resources somehow stimulated them to make contributions. It could also be complementary, so it sort of helped them, but, well, they make steps, but the steps were not that big. Or sometimes they were not, the resources were not aligned. So teachers wanted things, they wanted to contribute, but sort of school system says no, it's not possible. You cannot do it in this context. The school leader does not agree. Colleagues think, oh, you're making such a fuss with the research. You cannot step up now and contribute to this part of the curriculum, for example. So I think for the future, for me, that would be a really important thing to research. So how does that interaction between the different resources lead to teacher agency in practice? So I just want to give you an example, because I think these things are always very interesting and abstract, but how does that play out really in practice? So I just want to give you the example of Harry. And Harry is a very engaged and experienced teacher in a secondary school. And he applies for a scholarship to do a PhD. So he combines his teaching job with a job as a PhD researcher. His PhD research is actually subject matter specific. So it's not about didactics, it's not related to school issues or whatever, it's really specific. It's a history topic and it's related to Roman times, so it's not really related to what he does in the school. But when he starts doing this in his teaching role, he is really motivated to contribute what he learned, his expertise, contribute to school development. So in his situation, when his research progresses, he has a very good relationship with the school leader, who really values his role in the school. He gets the opportunity to develop a sort of research line for students in the upper grades. And his colleagues are really enthusiastic about it. They say, oh, we really need that. We need to prepare the students so they have research skills when they go to higher education. So he sort of has the free hand to do that. So he had made this really powerful contribution to his school, to curriculum development, and his context, it seemed like all the his own, who he is as a teacher in combination with the context are so aligned and stimulating that it really makes a huge difference. So this is something about agency and how I think that works or might play out in practice. But then the next thing I thought was, so how about the passion? Because somehow it seemed that in the research I did see that teachers sometimes really regained their passion for teaching, for example, by doing research. So they start to delve deeper, for example, in the learning process of students, or in the case of Harry, even delve deeper in a certain subject matter area, specific thing, and it really sparked his interest. It really sort of seemed to renew him as a teacher. So I just thought of some just personal observations, and one of the personal observations was, well, the context in which Harry did his work, but another one was the context of teacher educators who were involved in a book club. And these were teacher educators from various teacher education institutes and from schools who got together to read texts, to study texts, and often they left with the idea, wow, this is what I'm doing it for. That is why I am a teacher educator. I want to contribute to student teachers to build up that passion for the profession. So I thought, what is happening there? So that was sort of the start of my search for connecting passion and teacher agency. So I just delved a little bit in the literature, and I found this interesting quote cited in the book of Christopher Day, which says, passion is not just a personality trait that some people have and others lack, but it's rather something discoverable, teachable, or reproducible. And I thought that was very interesting. So it's discoverable, teachable, reproducible. So somehow I thought, that's what I think I see happening. So how does that work? And also in the book of Christopher Day, he gives this figure, in the middle is the passionate teacher. And he writes down below, next to the figure, he writes that this is an agenda for inquiry and development. So he brings together different aspects from the teacher as a person, the teacher as a professional. And when I was looking at it and studying it, I thought, okay, I recognize all these things. I recognize teachers becoming perseverant, courageous. I recognize the vision teachers develop. I recognize high expectations and ideals. Where is sort of the agency in this story? Because it's somehow there, but it seems implicit. Because I think what it shows is that these passionate teachers make influences. They try to influence, they make choices, and they try to sort of develop the best possible education for their students. So I started drafting this model. And it has a mistake on it, but I will correct it in the edited version. So in the middle is teacher professional agency, and I've seen, I think, in many contexts that this agency is sparked by teacher professional development and in teacher education. So somehow, for example, teacher professional development in the case of Harry had an influence on his expertise. He built expertise on research, and he used that expertise somehow in his practice to make an influence on the curriculum. So building this expertise together with his ideals and his drives influenced the choices he made in practice. And so I think that is one thing I thought of. The other thing I thought of was sometimes passion goes before agency and sometimes it's the other way around. Because I've seen people coming to the book club like, okay, well, this is just time to read some text together. I never have time to do it, so let's go to the book club. It's just, I don't know, my colleague asked me, I'm just coming, and leaving there in a different way. So somehow making a step, doing things a little bit different, can spark passion and can sort of revive or renew what teachers are or teacher educators are doing in their practice. So that is, so I think it can work two ways around. But the other thing I think is that, oh, this is really, this should be culture, structure, and material on the right-hand side. And I created two flames there. The other thing I think is that really the context in which you work either can help you sort of build that passion, but it can also really diminish it. I've talked to a lot of teachers and teacher educators who are very disappointed in their context because they do not get the opportunity to develop, they do not get the opportunity to build their knowledge, to infuse research in their practice. So I think it's really important to look at both. If you want to spark passion, it's a personal thing, but it's also a contextual thing. And talking about what drives you, I think, is key to build teachers and teacher educators' passion. And what really are mechanisms that are powerful in that respect, I think, are reflection and dialogue. So reflecting collaboratively, that's why you should go to the cafe this night, or go to the restaurant and talk to your colleagues. Reflecting is crucial, and dialogue is crucial. So, and these are things that come up from research every time. Reflection and dialogue, they're so powerful and so easily, I think, misunderstood. Because in fact, reflection can become instrumental and dialogue can be just sharing ideas and not constructing things together. So if we want to take it forward and look at what might be possible keys for sparking that passion and teacher agency, I think one powerful thing, and I heard that in an action research session today also, is create boundary crossing experiences, both for teachers and for teacher educators. I've been involved, and some of you in the room also went there, with the Summer Academy of the International Forum for Teacher Educator Development. There are people here, maybe you can just wave your hand. Yes, so teacher educators from different countries coming together and sharing their expertise, building on their expertise, was really for many a powerful experience. So boundary crossing and reflecting on what that did for your personal practice, I think is crucial, even also in teacher education. And second, I think what is really important is encouraging inquiry as stance, which I heard in different sessions today also. Yes. So the second example I used of the book club, I also saw that there, in that context, reflection on the personal and the professional was key to our way of working, and really sparked and helped teacher educators to regain their passion. And also meeting with teacher educators from different backgrounds, different institutes, different schools contributed to that. What we did in that context, and that's maybe to slightly illustrate the idea of reflection on the personal and the professional, is we chose what Kelchtemans called slow pedagogy. So it is reading a text and really carefully looking at what's happening in the text, studying the text together, but we added a layer to that. So we did not only say, do you really understand what this text is about, but we thought about ways of dialoguing with the text and speaking back to the text. So for example, we asked teacher educators to choose a specific piece from the text and to create something in response. And create something in response could be a performance, it could be an artwork, it could be something that they show themselves with, speaking back to the text. And that really provoked powerful discussions among teacher educators. So wrapping it up in a few possible keys, I think, for teacher education and teacher educators. I think it's really important in teacher education and professional development practice to provide boundary crossing experiences, to make sure that people know other contexts and learn and be curious about these contexts and reflect on those. Second is to encourage collaborative, personal and, collaborative reflection on the personal and the professional. So I think the personal is also really important aspect. So it's not instrumental reflection. It's not about tips and tricks. It's about who you are as a teacher and a teacher educator. The third is create interactional spaces for agency work. So make sure that programs, professional development, have room and space for maneuver, to experiment. And I think action research can be such a way to do that. And finally, make inquiry a stance and priority throughout the teacher education curriculum. So these are hopefully keys and understandings that that may be sparking discussion in the cafeteria, in the cafe tonight. And I would like to thank you very much for your
Okay, good afternoon, everybody. You are the bold and beautiful that could survive the entire day. So I'm just bold, but you are beautiful. Anyway, welcome all, and welcome all the guests from abroad that took a long flight to Israel, so enjoy your time here. So my name is Roy Petrushka, and yes, as just Chen was introducing me, I'm a teacher. It all started in 2014. 9 years ago, it was a summer day, and I was reading an article in a daily newspaper about the decline in high-level math teaching in Israel, and it was a kind of internal voice that was calling me, not even calling me, shouting at me, that I need to make this change and become a math teacher. And it was very apparent to me that that's the right thing to do. So I dropped everything I was doing. I wrapped up what I was busy at the time. I was actually in PhD studies, but I decided to drop all that. And it took me a couple of weeks, and I was involved in one of the Trump programs for high-tech people that want to make a transition to teaching, and it was in north of Israel, called Oranim College. It was fascinating, and since then I've been teaching math, and I'm blessed to do that. I enjoy every day, and it's great. So I'm here to talk about this initiative called From High Tech to Teaching that Chen was just introducing. I'm not coming from a kind of I will not talk about any studies or any researchers. I'm not coming from academics, but at the end I will make a couple of connections to different terms that Helma was talking about in the context of high tech to teaching. So that's basically who I am, and let's begin. So doesn't work. Somebody can, just 1 second, technical. Okay. Okay, so it all started in I think an inspirational quote that appeared in a research by McKinsey that was published back in 2007. The report was how the world's best performing education systems come out on top. And the quote itself was, the quality of an education system cannot exceed the quality of its teachers. Eli Horowitz, who is here, told me this quote when I met him back in the days when I started this process of making this transition, 2014. I was fortunate to have a meeting with him. And I think this was an inspirational kind of point that got some of our education leaders in Israel to start rethinking about our education system as a whole. It actually means we need to keep raising the bar, keep bringing in higher and higher quality people into the education system in order to get it better. And a great source of that is getting people from the high-tech industry, like me. There are about more than 1,000 people from high-tech industry that have already made this transition to an education system, and I'll be talking about that a little bit later. So we find that it's not that easy to make that transition. When we talk with people that made this change to the education system, we find different narratives and different kind of things that come up within discussions with them. First of all, they say, hey, when we were in the high-tech industry, we were the real asset of the company. We felt that we are the ones that bring the value to the company. We create the technology, we create the products, and the company understands we are the assets of the company. Now in the education system, we no longer feel that we are an asset. That's a very important aspect of this transition that makes it's very difficult for them to overcome it. The second one is that it feels like immigrating to a third world country. And I'm not talking about the huge gap in salary and benefits. That's obvious, yeah? But the feeling is that you can't really cope with that. So it's very, very difficult to make this transition. That's why in the first few years, we found that about 50% of the high-tech veterans that made these transitions couldn't survive, and they stayed for a year or 2 years maximum, and then left the education system back to the high-tech, to the warm hands of the high-tech industry. And we wanted to fix that problem. And Helma was talking before about combining the different passions that she has, right? So my passion was first to be a teacher, and I enjoy every day doing that. But the second one was to fix this problem and to help build a system or organization that could really support the process of having people join from the high-tech industry to the education system and do it successfully. So that's what we were doing. So let's talk about the qualities of people that actually do make this transition. So to overcome the things that I were just talking about, those difficulties, you need to have what I call a true-hearted intent. You have to have something, a voice in yourself, inside, calling you and saying this is the thing you really want to do. It's not easy to do this third world immigration, right? And to not be an asset anymore. You need to have a strong will for that, a desire. And all those people that make this transition, so they bring to the education systems tons of industry experience and context, and they have a lot of other traits that and different mindset and culture that can help them a lot in this transition. So all in all, they become very quickly admired by their students because the students see and observe their true-hearted intent, first of all. And that's huge. And that's a core element in this transition. And some of them even take it further and invent or implement some solutions that really advance our education system. So that's also a blessing. So these are the abilities or qualities, I would say, of teachers that do make this transition and become teachers. And as I said, we have more than 1,000 of them. So I invented this term called a flywheel, which is kind of, in Hebrew it's called Gagal Tnufa. It means that, let's start from the left. We actually established about 6 years ago, 5.5 years ago, a little organization that Chen mentioned that actually operates here inside Mofet. Actually, the head of this organization called Nachum Chofri, but he's busy now. He left to be with his grandchildren. So sorry for that. You could have met him if you don't know him. So we formed a little organization. I was one of the founders, I would say, of this organization that operates here, and it's called the Minhelet from high-tech to teaching. It's kind of orchestrates the entire process. It overlooks the entire problem of how to make this transition of hundreds of high-tech veterans to the education system and make it successful. So I said earlier that about 50% of them couldn't survive in the first few years, back in 2014, 15, 16. But in the last 5 years, since we have the Minhelet, almost 90% become excellent teachers and are extremely happy with this transition. So that's a huge improvement, and we also increased the numbers by maybe 3 times more teachers make this transition every year. So now we have about 300 a year doing this transition. So we got this umbrella organization called the Minhelet. It operates the entire process, orchestrates the entire process, and by doing that, getting a lot of, by the way, contribution and services and help from Machon Mofet in many, many different ways, and we thank Mofet for all the support and all the help and all the love we get from them. And we get those 300 people make this transition every year, and that advances Israeli education system substantially, and that's great. So that's the way I'm finishing up. Okay, just 1 minute, 2 minutes. So what do we see, and I want to make the connection to different things Helma was talking about in her lecture. So those teachers coming from high-tech, they develop a sense of autonomy. They know how to balance their expertise, their industry expertise, and the curriculum. They feel less constrained in their work. They have a lot of, they show a lot of passion in their everyday work, and they innovate inside and outside the class, and most of them thrive in their career. I'm wrapping up. So what is teacher agency? There is a different definition I just found in Google. Okay, maybe it's not the one you like. Sorry, Elma. The capacity of teachers to act purposefully, direct their professional growth, find solutions to challenges they face, and improve their practice. More or less close to what you're talking about. So with a supportive environment we provide through the Minelet, we definitely see that those teachers that transition from high tech are agentic professionals, no doubt about it. And it's a call for action. Maybe you can do some research on this population. I would like to cooperate with Elma or anyone else to really identify all the different kind of core elements here in the entire story and make it even better. So thank you very much.